Hello, I'm Rob McPhail, one of the careers consultants here at RGU. You're joining us for one of our In Conversation With interviews, where we're talking to different people to get their insight into what students can do to develop their employability and ultimately achieve their career ambitions. These sessions have been organised by the Centre for Employability, which is part of Student Life. For this session, I'm delighted to be joined by Mark Dalgarno, who is a recruitment manager with Motive Offshore Group. Hi, Mark. How are you doing today?
I'm doing no bad, thank you, Rob. I really appreciate you and the team having me on for this today. I'm looking forward to it.
Great. No, thank you for joining us. So, Mark, just first off, do you want to tell us a little bit about your current role?
So, a recruitment manager for Motive Offshore Group. So, I support and guide, I guess, recruitment for Motive Offshore Group around the world. Now, we're originally born and bred in Aberdeenshire, but we have bases not only in Aberdeenshire, but in places like the UAE, in Brazil, in Houston, Norway, Taiwan, and Singapore. So although the vast majority of the recruitment we do is in the northeast of Scotland, we're recruiting globally. So I support the process, support the managers, support the candidates, and hopefully help the company grow and promote itself as a good employer. There's heaps of things that happen in between that, but that's the general gist of it. Helping Motive to hire good folk and hopefully help folk get good jobs with Motive, basically.
Great. Okay, sounds good. So, I suppose my first question, really, Mark, what would be the best piece of advice that you can give to a student as they prepare to enter the job market?
I think there's lots of advice, definitely, but I think as an ex-student myself, I know that there's a lot to come with this, a lot of pressures and demands. But when I was thinking about this question, my best advice that I would think was just give it absolutely everything you've got. I think when you come out of being out of university, you're applying for jobs. It can be quite a scattergun approach, and understandably so. But just I realize it takes time, but just give it absolutely everything. Throw yourself into it. Be the best version of yourself that you possibly can, because that's what stands out the most. But equally, do not worry about getting it wrong. In terms of maybe having bad experiences, poor applications, or maybe going for interviews and not doing well, or even subsequently taking the job that doesn't work out. It's a part of the learning. So don't panic about getting it wrong, because if you keep trying, you're going to end up getting it right. So give everything, but don't worry about getting it wrong at the same time as well, because it will work itself out eventually.
Yeah, I think that's good advice. So, I think just about not maybe putting too much pressure on yourself when you're starting off. There is going to be a bit of trial and error. You're not going to probably get that kind of dream job on the first application sort of thing. So I think that's very wise words. Um, when you advertise a position, what are the key things that you want to see from a candidate in their application?
Every role is different. So obviously there's different requirements and different responsibilities included in a role, which means obviously different levels of experience and skills are needed depending on what that role is. But what personally from my role and a lot of every company wants is you need to get a sense of somebody's personality. I think like every CV or application comes as a black text on a white bit of paper or digital paper. So it's very hard to get a sense of who that person is. So what I would say is like, when people are applying for jobs, like AI hasn't taken over the world yet. We're still in a position where we're hiring people, not a CV. So while yes, you are still submitting a CV, you're writing an application, and a cover letter will be there. But what every employer needs to do or is tasked to do is to hire the right person for the role, and that doesn't matter if all the experience that you've got in the world will not fit if it's not the right person for the team. And what you need to get across there is that sense of personality as best as you possibly can. Tell people who you are, tell people why you're applying for the job, tell the employer why you feel that what they do as a company fits in with the aspirations and needs that you've got. Because everybody's got aspirations, everybody's got needs. But every employer has also got its own needs as well. It's always looking for the right person for the team. It's looking for the right skill set. It's looking for the right behaviors and mindset. And there's not like a one size fits all model for any role, but every company wants to hire somebody that's going to fit or make an accommodation to make the working life that you've got for your team and your business better. So you'll never hire somebody purely on experience. So you've got to try and get as much of your personality across it as possible. You want to engage with people quickly. When we get to a work environment like you and I are doing right now, there's always collaboration, there's always conversation, there's work, and like nobody works in isolation. So that unity needs to start from the application. So get yourself across. Don't hold back from putting yourself across. And my advice to people sometimes when you're writing things like cover letters, profiles, summaries, or executive statements, as sometimes people call them, write them as if you'd speak them. So, yes, you maybe can't put it into an Aberdonian language in our case, or maybe you have to stay away from any profanity or anything. But, if you were tasked with a question that says, look, you've got 1 minute to tell us about you in front of us in person, you would naturally go and write that away and then you would recite it. So do the same with your cover letter, do the same with your summary, and write it in a language and a tone, if you will, that you would actually present it in, because although people are not hearing you say it when they read the applications, they'll pick up little traits from individuals, and it could be quite jovial, it could be quite light-hearted, it could be really professional. Whatever's a reflection of you, just try and get yourself across, because that's what employers want. They want to learn out about, people's aspirations, their goals. They want to learn about achievements. Make it about you, because this is your career, and employers want to hire a person, not just the experience. So personality definitely is key for me.
Yeah, absolutely agree. I think, we talk about the importance of it being a personal CV. It's got to be personal to you.
Yeah.
It's got to tell your story, and it's got to be authentic. And I suppose from your perspective, I guess, like a lot of employers, you'll be receiving a lot of CVs, a lot of applications. You probably don't have the time to read every line of every single application. So I think when you will feel the difference, won't you, when you get a CV that comes in that somebody's actually it's written by a person and they're trying to connect with that opportunity that you've advertised.
Well, I'll just give you an example. Before I've actually jumped on this call today, Rob, actually, somebody from RGU alone this is actually just an air of serendipity here, but somebody that's applied for a marketing role for us who's actually, based on their experience and requirements, is probably a little bit light on the experience. But because they've reached out to us directly and said, why they were interested in working for us, they took the time to really kind of get across who they were and what they wanted to do. It made us go, well, this person's worth a call. They've shown an interest in working for us. Now, that doesn't mean that they'll get the job. They'll have to go through the process, but instantly engages when you take the time to reach out to an employer directly, because they've all got needs. They've all got individuals of their teams that have got responsibilities and, I guess, career aspirations for themselves. A company isn't this like mythical beast. It's individuals that have got their own career aspirations like you do. So you need to supplement them as much as you're hoping that a business is going to supplement your career aspirations. So it's just about being unique, being personable, being respectful. Naturally, people deserve respect in their application process back from employers. They deserve feedback. They deserve communication. But employers need that too. It's supposed to be this dynamic where people get along, or at least communicate very quickly. And I think that's key. If you reach out to people directly and make it personal, you're right, it stands out. You're absolutely right. Not everything gets read, probably, and that's unfair. But that's the nature of the beast sometimes. But if you take the time, it will be noticed. Definitely will be noticed by the vast majority of people reading CVs and applications.
Yeah, and I think, certainly we would always say to students, put the emphasis on quality rather than quantity. So in other words, it's better to be making fewer but better approaches and applications to companies, rather than just kind of thinking, well, I'm going to send out as many applications as possible and not tailoring those applications. So I think certainly what you're saying chimes in with that making it as personal and as engaging as possible. And maybe the kind of sometimes a speculative kind of approach where you're kind of reaching out sometimes where a position isn't advertised. Sometimes that
Yes,
can
definitely.
be something that's favorably viewed as well. So it's kind of, why not give it a go?
Yeah, I think some people are a bit, and understandably, apprehensive of the time it takes with the potential of knockback or negative outcomes, obviously rejections, we'll call it as it is. But I think too often, a lot of people, and doesn't just apply to students, it applies to anyone of any background or discipline or age, is that, they'll probably put in the minimum amount of effort because it saves a lot of time, and why would they put in so much so much effort if they're going to get the feedback? And that's for employers to get better. 100%. But my argument along that is, if you don't put in that effort and you're really worried about not getting the feedback anyway, if you don't put in that feedback then, or that effort, then you're not going to get the feedback either way. It works. So, I
Yeah.
think it's important for people to do it justice for themselves, not just for the employer, because this is their career. Like, it's not, the employer doesn't decide what you do with your career. You're there to do what's right for you and your career and whatever you want to do. Whatever your aspirations are, whatever your motivations are, whatever your needs and wants, do yourself justice first. But if you do that for you and then just slightly tailor it to what the employer needs and play into their needs, then that will win. Like, the experience and the skills will take care of itself. That's something either the business can't control, nor can the candidate. But if you do it justice for yourself and give the employer a little bit of love, typically you'll get a good response. Not all the time, but probably more often than not. And you'll actually enjoy it. Do you know, I think I often find too often people don't recognize the benefit of actually taking time to think about what's important in your career and thinking about, values and traits and characteristics and achievements. But it's quite a cathartic place to be. Sometimes it can be a bit raw. It can be a little bit difficult, but if you can spend time thinking about what's important for you, that will manifest itself into a good plan of action. And then, typically you see a lot better applications, better interviews, and hopefully more successful outcomes for everybody if you just take a bit of time, definitely.
Absolutely, yeah. Just wondering, what are the kind of key skills that you are looking for from applicants?
Again, like, it would depend on the role. So every role's got different requirements. But I think every time I've ever spoke to somebody, I've generally kind of got, I guess, one way of looking at it from, if you are applying for jobs, is that, when you're looking at job descriptions, or looking at the experience or skills that are required, kind of look at like the top 2 or 3 things that are on that job description. And ultimately, the reason why they're top 2 or 3 is the same reason why we as candidates will put relevant experience in an order of, I guess, level. Like, we'll always put the stuff that's most prominent to the top. So there's a reason why employers put that at the top. I don't know if they even think about it sometimes, but maybe it's a subconscious to say this is the most important stuff. Look at those top 2 or 3 things, both from the responsibilities in the job and maybe like the experience and skills required. And if you are applying for jobs, line up, if you have them available, specific examples, either written down or mentally, where you have delivered against that responsibility or have that experience. And almost like write out like a scenario, write it out where, when I was at such and such a company, I delivered this project, which then ties into skills and stuff. So I think when you're looking at these job descriptions, look at what they're looking for, look at what you've got, and then make some specific examples of where you've actually achieved that or done something similar, or can showcase where you've got that experience or skill, and make it specific. Make it time bound, make it project led, make it whether it's education based or whether it's within an employment perspective. Name drop company names, name drop revenue stream, whatever it may be at the time. Just make it specific. Ultimately, this doesn't always have to go on your CV, but what we're all trying to work here is not only to get to an interview, but we're also trying to get ready for an interview. So the more preparation that you put in to your CV, the better prepared you are for an interview. And the more examples you can draw, the easier it is to write these cover letters, write these CVs, or draw conclusions based on what the employer is looking for. Ultimately, employers are putting these experience requirements on job descriptions for a reason, because they need it. So they're asking people to tell them that they've got this experience. And I think sometimes people are a little bit too coy or a little bit too shy or maybe reserved to kind of get themselves across. But this is what employers are asking for. They're literally saying, without actually asking it, do you have this experience? And if you do, can you please tell us? Do it. Do it. I mean, nobody's going to be silly enough to do it in a way that's, says, I guess, egotistical or anything like that, but they'll do it in a way that's constructive and, respectfully about them. That's what this application is. It's about you as a person. So, if you've got specific examples, get ready to shout about them. If it's relevant, tell them, because that's what they're asking for. So it depends on what the job is, but, look at it each time and showcase and make it specific. As best as you possibly can. Get them down on a cover letter, get them down in an email and say, look, when I was at such and such a company, or when I was at RGU, my dissertation was on this. Whatever you think is relevant, the company will decide if that's what they need. But all you can do is play with the cards that you've been dealt or have earned, I guess. So yeah, just tell them as much as you can that you think is relevant.
Yeah, and I think, in my experience, students often seem to kind of undersell themselves sometimes, or maybe not realize that they actually have a lot of skills. And as you said, those skills can be, the examples that students can provide can come from from their education, from their work experience, maybe from other aspects of their life as well. So, you should take confidence in the fact that you do have those skills, and as you say, be prepared to talk about them, to describe them.
Yeah, totally agree.
Just moving on, Mark, in a challenging jobs market, is there anything else that students and graduates can do to improve their chances of getting hired? What kind of things particularly impress you?
I think you mentioned it a little bit earlier on there, Rob. Actually, I know it's hard. I appreciate it's really challenging. Having been a student myself, I know how daunting the task is, and it's super competitive as well. And obviously that lack of experience, if you will, makes it difficult. But um, my advice would be probably just to really play to what an employer is looking for. Obviously, do yourself justice, as I just said, about the application that you make, and thinking about relevant examples, and try not to get too hung up on, or maybe they're looking for this or maybe looking for that. Again, you can only go with what you've got, and if you believe this is a job that you want to do, all you can do is shoot at your best shot based on the experience you've got, be that from the education. There could be personal or hobbies related interests that could play into that. Could be achievements outside of a professional capacity that could lean into certain skill sets, as well as having experience. But I think to add a bit of value, if I was a student, and again, this is applicable for all ages, or any background, but really take time to connect with employers. So when you're sending applications, when you're sending CVs, when you're sending cover letters, address it to them. Really make it personal. I get it, it takes a bit longer to do, and they have to proofread things, and it takes time to articulate it very well, but it makes a difference. Like we just said this earlier on, that obviously employers are trying to hire people for their business that they believe we hire them, they will want to be here. Like nobody company wants to hire somebody and then leave after 6 months. And so employers are looking for that validation really quickly, that this person will take on this job and will enjoy being here. Now, obviously, it doesn't always work out like that, but that's the intention. Everybody's applying for a job for it to last a period of time that is sustainable for them, and every employer is looking to hire somebody that they're going to get along with and work well together and get the output from. Nobody's going into this to make things worse. It's always meant to be a positive thing. So go into it with a positive attitude, with the intention that you're going to get, or at least try to get, what you deserve. But from if you're a candidate or a student looking to get ahead, take time to connect with that employer. Make it personal. If you can find the name of the hiring manager or the recruiter, address them directly. You don't have to big them up or anything, but just make it a bit more touching. Tell the employer specifically what it is about them that has appealed to work with them. Why is this job relevant for what you believe is right for you next? And we just talked about the experience and skills. Reference them. I think people are always looking for, like, oh, your CV needs to be 2 pages, or your cover letter needs to be 1 page. Yeah, there's definitely a border to how much is too much. But if anyone's telling you it needs to be this, I'd be telling them politely where to go, because this is your story, it's your career. There's no rules for this. Do whatever you think is relevant to get yourself across. You'll know what looks good and what doesn't. And if somebody else doesn't like it, then that's their problem, not yours. You do yourself justice. But to add to that, if to connect with employers, LinkedIn's a wonderful tool for this as well. And I would encourage anyone to connect with people on LinkedIn. You don't have to become their best mate right away, but if you've applied for a job, follow up with them. Follow the company on LinkedIn. Now they might not see that you followed it, don't get me wrong, but if you're following them, then you're going to be kept up to date a little bit more intuitively with what's going on with their business. You might see some business news. That might not lead you anywhere in the short term, but if you've got an interview, then you're going to be better prepared. You're going to have a better understanding of the culture. You're going to be able to reference certain wins and that they've maybe recently had, or achievements, or, oh great, I saw you guys just won that award for such and such. That's going to feed into an employer's, okay, this person's keen. But if you connect with hiring managers online, drop them a message to tell them, oh, look, hey, I've just applied for your job. Look, I hope I hear back from you soon. You don't have to try and get their time. If you feel confident enough, you're welcome to. That's what LinkedIn's for, is to try and make professional connections. But if you'd applied for a job at Motive and then dropped a message to myself on LinkedIn, and just said, hey, look, delighted to connect with you. Hope to hear back from you soon. My intention would be to get back to you. Don't get me wrong, but sometimes it's not always practical. But by the time it comes to we as a company are reviewing applications, most managers or recruiters or managers will go, oh, wait a minute, he or she messaged me on LinkedIn last week. That then can only be seen positively. So when it comes to the review stage, you're factoring that into decision making if it's the right person for the role. And if somebody's done, if you've got like for like experience with two people, and there's, I guess this is very, maybe not the best way of describing this, but if you've got two people to make a decision on, one contacted you and one didn't, I mean, you're going to go with the one that contacted you. If it was like for like and there was no disadvantage anywhere else, you're going to pick the one that showed them more interest because that gives you more confidence. So you take that extra little bit of time to connect with people and build up your network. You might not get that job with that company at that time, but you said there about like maybe sending companies messages speculatively. Sometimes that can be good, and it can be a place that might not lead you to a specific job, but you build up your network. LinkedIn's a great tool for, I guess, the the algorithm of life, generating different vantage points or updates or connections that could lead you to different jobs. And you might not join the dots to how you got there, but ultimately it's a really good tool to kind of build up that network, and I think that would be it for me. Connect with employers. Almost send applications the way that you would deserve a response. Personal, tailored, clear. Make it the same way that you're expecting employers to give it back to you. Just that's how it's supposed to be. And people are supposed to be working together here. So let's just make it as positive and clear and transparent and fair and timely as it possibly can, and eventually it'll come good.
That's great, Mark. Some really good advice there, and pleasingly, it's kind of chiming with a lot of things that we would say to students as well. So I think there's never kind of one simple answer to these kind of things, is there? It's kind of a mixed approach of, doing the research on the company, using LinkedIn, trying to make a network for yourself, how you kind of engage with employers, standing out from the crowd, all of those things, using the career service, hopefully as well, would be something that obviously we would want students to be doing. So I think, you've given us some really good advice, there for students and graduates to think about as they begin to try and make that connection with employers and be successful in their applications. So listen, thanks so much for joining us today for the In Conversation with. That's been really, really useful, and really appreciate you taking the time, and just wish you the best for your career moving forward.
Thank you so much. And hopefully everything I've said there adds some thoughts or helps in any way possible. So thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it.
That's great. Thank you, Mark.
Thanks, Rob. Appreciate it.
Okay, bye just now.